darkness we do what we can. In daylight we're oblivion. Our hearts so raw and clear are turning away from here. On the water we have walked like the fearless child. What was fastened we've unlocked, revealing wondrous wild. And in search of confirmation we have jumped into the fire and scrambled with our burning feet through uncontrolled desire. And in darkness we do what we can. In daylight we're oblivion. Our hearts so raw and clear are turning away from here.
His approach was radical, his attitude humble, his competitive prowess legendary. But more than anything else, Australia's Mark Richards was a total original. Despite his beginnings as a gangly kid with an unorthodox style, MR surfed his way to competitive surfing's highest honor 4 times. Along the way, he became a master shaper, a successful businessman, and a role model for thousands of young Australian surfers.
I see him as doing this big swooping snapback, you know, where he's just carving out of the top, arms spread straight out and looking back into the bowl.
Fantastic. I mean, he was such a good surfer. When he used to walk down the beach at Cronulla with his pink and green, half aboard, one side pink, one half green, and used to wear bright colours and just surf so smooth and so good. We all used to go down the beach and watch him surf when he came.
Everyone could be proud of MR as a surfer, you know, just a spectacular champion for all time.
The nice guy who finished first, he remains one of surfing's most likable characters. MR critics are nearly non-existent, which tells you much of what you need to know about the man. Soft-spoken, polite, and respectful, Richards never went in for controversy. And while his surfing would now be considered relatively conservative, in his day, MR was considered the most progressive surfer this side of Larry Bertelsmann. That was merely the beginning. He also proved to be one of the sport's most consistent threats in huge surf at spots like Waimea Bay.
So raw and clear, turning away from here.
Born in 1957 to surfing parents, Richards was raised on the beach. His father Ray ran a popular Newcastle surf shop, and weekends were family surf affairs. MR got his first board when he was 6, which he learned to surf during vacations in Queensland. His boyhood years found him enrolled in that uniquely Australian institution, regimented, club-driven competitions. He took his knock-kneed style through the schoolboys, cadet, and juniors divisions, with near-instant success, surfing against contemporaries like Simon Anderson, Mark Warren, and Peter Townend.
What I tried to do was basically steal the manoeuvres, but put my own style to it, which makes sense because if you look at people, everybody's a different size, a different shape, a different personality. Everybody stands differently, everybody walks differently. So I think your personality actually comes through in your surfing and in your surfing style. And when you actually copy someone else's surfing style, it's never you. You know, it's a poor imitation of them.
1972 was a clutch year for the 15-year-old. First, he made his inaugural run to Hawaii with shaper Jeff McCoy, a journey that would become annual tradition. Concentrating on Pupukea and Rocky Point, he recalls sitting on the beach in awe as Jeff Hackman took Sunset Beach apart. Wise enough to realize that his time would come, he opted to save one of the planet's most respected and feared reef breaks for a future trip. MR immediately felt comfortable on the North Shore. Surfing the area's humbler breaks, he was able to feed off the energy of the hot Hawaiian kids. Non-confrontational and quick with an eager smile, He was accepted into a fraternity infamous for its hostility to outsiders. This phenomena would serve him well in the coming seasons. Year's End found him traveling to the World Contest in San Diego as a member of the Australian national team. Though he only managed an 11th place finish, David Nueva's win on a fish poured fuel on MR's twin fin fire. He returned to Newcastle with one of the stubby split tails and set to work.
It was just like I was unleashed, you know. It was like I got on these things and they went fast. They were really easy to turn. You know, you could just go screaming off the top of the wave. You could drift them, you could tail slide them. You could just sort of do everything on them. So I started surfing them in contests, and I just started winning, you know, a lot more than I actually had before.
Despite a full-time commitment to competitive surfing, Mark Richards squeaked through high school. As proud as they might have been of his surfing accomplishments, his parents suggested a year-long course of pre-university work. MR promptly failed out. His father granted him 1 year to pursue a surfing career before he entered the workplace. By this point, Mark's unique style had matured. Overcoming a tall physique that included muscular legs, a slight upper body, wing-like arms, and an impossibly long neck, the man once jokingly dubbed the Wounded Gull began to soar. Knees together, hands upturned, and chin thrust forward, MR could be picked out of a crowd from a mile away. Arms spread wide from the moment he stood up, the typical Richards ride began with a swooping drop-in, a tightly crouched bottom turn, and a spray-chucking, almost drop-kneed snapback off the top. Somehow it all came together, and past critics began rallying around the 18-year-old as a progressive, stylish surfer. 1974 marked the peak of cool school surfing on the North Shore. Pot was the drug of choice, and the tube slouch was the ultimate statement. MR, a renowned teetotaler, copped his recreational buzz from purely legal sources. "I do enjoy the odd block of chocolate," he revealed in an interview. As far as the straight-line cruise went, he wanted none of that either. Twin fins had taught him that up and down was the go, and his surfing was oriented towards the lip, even on single fins. While this hot dog approach served him well during average surfs, the biggest waves of his life would require an entirely different set of skills. One of surfing's most memorable events went off that year, the Smirnoff at Waimea. Richards was an alternate, but gained entry into the main event at the last second. Despite the advice of longtime big wave riders like Peter Cole, event chief Fred Hemming sent heats of surfers out in near closeout conditions. MR had never surfed there before.
A lot of guys that had a lot of experience in Hawaii were questioning the sanity of actually running the event, saying it was too dangerous. And Fred basically said that, listen, you guys, you're a bunch of wusses. I'll paddle out there and catch a wave and prove it can be ridden. And as soon as he said that, everyone just kind of gave up and went, oh, well, it's on, because we knew Fred would actually do it.
I remember the morning, it was one of those mornings you go, holy shit. You don't even go to the beach. I mean, it was no breath, not a breath of air, and there was this mist hanging over Waimea that it does when it's real big and the wind's not blowing, and you could hear boom, boom, like a dynamite explosion, waves break, and they're washing in. I mean, just the roar, and it just struck terror into your soul. And
I was kind of absolutely terrified, but I thought that I had to go out there and actually try and catch some waves, because I knew if I didn't, it would be the end of my career. You know, I knew I'd be branded a wuss by the Australian media, and I knew that Bugs and Sean had never talked to me again, especially Rab after paying the entry fee.
And I said, well, we can cancel it because it's too big, or we can go out and have the most epic contest in the history of the sport. And I said, well, we're going to have the most epic sport. And the surfers are saying, we don't want to go out, and you know, you're risking guys' lives, and this is unfair.
I didn't want to know about it, but I felt I had to actually go out there and do it. And you know, I caught some waves. You know, it wasn't quite as bad as I thought it was going to be. Again, the coloured singlet mentality kind of got me, and I thought, I'm not just sitting out here and being part of the furniture, I'm actually going to take off. And there were 6 guys in the heat, And when they read out the results in those days, they used to go backwards, you know, and they went 6th place, I can't remember, 5th place, and they got to 4th place, and top 3 went through to the final, and they went 4th place, Mark Richards, and I went, yes, yes, I don't have to go back out.
Truth be known now, years later, I wouldn't have gone out for anything. If they said, yeah, go out, I say, fine, contest is off.
The following year at Waimea cemented MR's reputation. He came back to win the Smirnoff at Waimea, taking out the World Cup at Haleiwa and Sunset immediately thereafter. Returning to Australia with a fistful of cash, even Father Ray had to admit that the future looked bright for Australian surfing in general, and for his son in particular.
Cause the retro police will arrest you at the gig for your hurdy-gurdy and monkey shine. Hurdy-gurdy and monkey shine. Need a break? Hey, stand in line. Hurdy-gurdy and monkey shine. We're now blind boy, I see your ship of fools. You didn't make it home, but you look so cool.
When Mark Richards arrived in Hawaii for the pro events, aloha was in short supply. Oahu surfers had grown tired of the brash, crowing Aussie contingent, and thumpings were being handed out. Ian Kane slept with a tennis racket at the ready after Rabbit Bartholomew had been beaten like a rented mule. Remarkably, MR escaped unscathed, indeed, unthreatened. This could be attributed to several factors, primarily his mellow, deferential nature. But more telling was the fact he'd long integrated with the North Shore surfing community. While most international competitors traveled in groups and lived in virtual compounds near Turtle Bay, MR lodged in a Chun's Reef rental and preferred surfing with the locals. Eddie Aikau put it succinctly in a meeting call to understand and hopefully end the violence. Everyone knows how good Richard surfs, Eddie said. He doesn't need to go around telling everyone about it.
At the time, MR was, coming to the forefront and being a surf hero. Nationality was really at the forefront of surfing, like it was the Aussies coming over here and Ian Cairns, just like sort of laying down the law, and Rabbit, carrying on like Muhammad Bugs or whatever, and yeah, they had their rap down, and it was pretty gnarly rap, man. They'd come to the North Shore and show off and get punched out and whatever, and MR was like one of those magical surfers who just rise above all that sort of stuff. He's an Aussie, and all Australians were really proud of him, and he was proud of being an Australian, but everybody loved him,
It was a pivotal year for MR. Inspired by a twin-fin Reno Abalera surf to great effect at Bell's, Mark began getting serious about surfboard design. He began an apprenticeship with Dick Brewer, learning the finer points of shaping. All the while, he retained an open mind, riding Tom Parrish bolts, Ben Ipa stingers, and the occasional Jim Richardson shape. It was during this season that he forged a relationship with his ultimate wave, Maui's Honolulu Bay. Riding a honed rocket ship of a single fin, Richards' flared cutbacks and burning down-the-line speed earned a place in the all-time performance pantheon.
It's one of the most perfect waves I've ever surfed. It's got this incredible horseshoe bowl deal at the end where, most waves, as you project off the bottom and start coming off the top, they're losing power. You've actually got to stay really close to the curl, to keep in that power pocket. But Honolulu just has this thing that comes back at you. It's like this, slingshot deal as you're coming onto the inside, like a racetrack slingshot. So we just had incredible surf. It was uncrowded. There weren't very many people surfing. It was hot, it was sunny. You got 2 other islands sitting out there in the distance. Blue sky, clouds, that beautiful valley behind you. It's like you just sat in the water there and just go, wow, am I dreaming or is this real?
By 1977, he was focused on riding his own tools. His competitive skills were still on the rise, and his visibility in the media was booming. In the early 1980s, Mark Richards became the most dominant competitive surfer that the world had seen, and the IPS's first multiple champion. While the early years of pro surfing were intense, MR was still known for his gentlemanly attitude in and out of the water. Now a little looser and more confident, he became something of a spokesman and was a regular guest on Australian television and radio. When a surf magazine asked him what made him happy in a 1981 interview, he responded, "Sex and tube rides." Those who knew him only from the early years were aghast when the quote became a cover blurb.
And realistically, if you asked any surfer what makes them happy, you know, they'd probably say sex and tube rides. I'd still answer the same way. Seriously, you know, like anyone who surfs, basically, you know, the ultimate is to get barreled. You don't go, wow, let's go surfing and find some 2-foot slop, you know, to do Rios or to do floaters. It's like, let's go find some pits and, you know, pull into some boxes. And it's the same, you take your average red-blooded guy, doesn't matter what nationality he is, you know, if he's not surfing, all he wants to do is get laid, you know? What else is there in life?
It was during these times that one of the sport's great rivalries was seeded. MR was being ghosted by Shane Horan, a white-hot kid from Sydney. The prototypical toe-headed wild child made no bones about his desire to take out the champ, and he had the moves to back it up. The two couldn't have been more different, and the surf mags ate it up. Shane was brash, quick to pop off, and surfed like the waves were on fire, and it was his duty to put them out. For Richards, wins were becoming automatic. The judges called him polished. Shane called him predictable. What followed were several years of all-time battles. Richards, having prevailed 4 times over the upstart, remembers them fondly. Shane, now a balanced, respected elder himself, has his own views.
What I remember a lot about us is if I was in the water, he'd come out, and if he was in the water, I'd go out, and we used to just have these classic battles, and they were better than any heats or anything that we ever had, and we just went off, you know, and it was, they're the sessions I remember. That's the best times I remember with MR.
While MR's interest in following the tour waned in the mid-80s, he went out with a bang. Back-to-back victories at Waimea Bay in a pair of Billabong Pro events. His efforts served notice to the younger pros that anyone calling themselves a professional better damn well charge when conditions were dire. Today, Mark Richards resides in his beloved Newcastle and owns a surf shop where he sells his shapes to an appreciative public. Married with 3 children, surfing still plays a key role in his life. He's particularly impressed with Kelly Slater and greeted the news that Slater had broken his most titles record with bittersweet goodwill. Above all, Richards is appreciative of all that surfing's given to him.
The life that surfing has given me has been, you know, pretty darn incredible. You know, I just feel so lucky to have, you know, experienced what I've experienced, and, you know, to be able to still surf, and I guess, in inverted commas, to be a surfer. You know, I think if you're a surfer, you're one of the luckiest people on the planet.
While he enjoys the surf whenever he can and is in otherwise excellent condition, chronic back pain has plagued him for nearly 29 years. Yet, like all surfers, Richards wouldn't trade his lot in life with anyone and finds some of his most sacred moments in the lineup.
To be in the water, you know, to paddle out and get cleaned up and duck dive a few waves and get smashed on the head a bit and, you know, take off on a wave and, you know, just basically glide along and being in the ocean. You know? It's probably not so much actually catching a wave and gliding along. It's that feeling of, of being in the ocean. You know, it's just a sort of a really beautiful feeling when you're out there.
I took a black cat, I came back, threw him in the pot. Took a blue snake, a green snake, tied him in the knot. Took a spit hair, a dried pear, buried in the ground. Took a dead fish, a jarred dish, made a spooky sound. And I'm casting my spell on you, zombie love and a black voodoo, a mojo hand and a cockaroo. And I'm casting my spell on you, yeah. Took a rasp ball, a hog shaw, laid him in the sack. I took a gold tooth, a dead goose, made a little backpack. Took some cane liquor to burn quicker, get her in my mind. I took a black cat, I came back, threw him in the pot. Took a blue snake, a green snake, tied him in the knot. Took a spit hair, a dried pear, buried in the ground. Took a guitar, a pokeball, made a spooky sound. And I'm casting my spell on you, zombie love and a black voodoo, a mojo hand and a cockaroo. And I'm casting my spell on you, with a zombie love and a black voodoo. And I'm casting my spell on you, with a mojo hand and a cockaroo. And I'm casting my spell on you.